All right, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at SABA Summer School course number 2, From Push to Pull, a new approach to learning and content curation. I'm Caitlin Bixby with SABA. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager, and I'd love to introduce you to our primary presenters today. I'll also be talking a little bit. We have Brittany McCain joining us from Open Sesame. Brittany's been working with Open Sesame as a leading content provider, and she's brought in over 2,500 e-learning courses as part of her role on the content curation team, and has worked with Fortune 500 organizations to plan their e-learning curriculum. As a marketing development manager, she connects the needs of CLOs and learning professionals with the product sales and marketing teams at Open Sesame, and she's going to be running through content strategy, prescribed versus over-the-counter learning, and using dots to curate and maximizing your creation strategy. Also joining us today is Lauren Clarke, the Lead Development Specialist at Delaware North. Lauren is a Lead Development Specialist for the Delaware North Corporate Talent and Workforce Development Team since 2014. She has over 10 years of diverse human resources and management experience that spans established organizations in the retail, financial, and hospitality industries. She has extensive hands-on experience leading HR initiatives, including policy design, compensation, performance management, recruiting, compliance reporting, learning management system implementations, HR workflows development, and training and development and benefits administration. I'm sure all topics that you on the phone can relate to. So again, welcome to today's session, and I hope you get a lot out of it. So Brittany, please take it away.
Sounds great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you guys having me speaking on today's summer school. And to really get us started, I first wanted to define content a bit more, as it's a word that you're going to hear me use a lot in today's presentation. To me, content can be as simple as a tweet that somebody wrote, a picture that's been uploaded on Instagram with a clever caption, an article maybe that you've commented and shared across Facebook, or an instructional video that's uploaded into YouTube. Content can also be defined as in a more traditional sense, such as the materials that are being covered in a classroom or something you've learned at an instructor-led training event. Personally, in my role at Open Sesame, I've gotten very familiar with e-learning content, as Open Sesame has curated and maintains over 20,000 e-learning courses. And that's really what sparked my interest in content curation strategy. I learned very quickly that you need a good content curation framework to really be able to move people from being only push training content to having content that your users actually want to pull from. And I really do see curation as the first step to address some of the common challenges that I'm seeing organizations face today. So for example, in my experience, I've never really walked into an office and seen rows of guys that look exactly like this. They learn the same, they have the same background, the same level of experience. Most offices that I go into look a lot more like this, a stronger, diverse group of individuals. And today, a growing number of organizations are truly starting to look a lot more like this. We're acquiring more diversity and talent in terms of background, education, and age, and even individual job roles are more diverse than they've ever been before in terms of the responsibilities and the cross-functional skills that are needed to perform well on the job. And having a single type of content works really great if you have that uniform workforce like the guy I showed at the beginning. But more than likely, that's not the reality you're facing, and you have a lot more to consider. And one of the things that you have to consider is location. And just like having one single type of learner makes things a lot simpler, so does having a single location. In-person training can easily be taught by the same instructor. Local laws and regulations are easier to manage. But as that footprint starts to grow, so does the demand that your training department has. Classes now have to be organized by time zone, and you have to begin to coordinate costly travel or find the right web classroom platform to start using. Another thing that people often overlook when it comes to location is cultural norms. So what might be normal at one location might be something completely different across the globe. And when you overlook that cultural piece, it oftentimes can cause confusion or leave users with a feeling of unconnectedness to the headquarters or really disconnected from the mission of the company overall. Another challenge that I find is the breadth of content that people are asked to be covered today. Most of the organizations I work with are doing really well in the areas of safety and compliance. It's something that's fairly manageable when it comes to measuring and tracking. However, people are demanding new skills and increased employee development, and learning leaders are being asked to provide a lot more topics than they ever have before. They're responsible for a really wide range of learning. And they're also being asked to do this while staying within their budget. So I'm sure there's a few of you on the line who have been blessed with a really large budget and a great team to be able to work with, but most people are working with something a little more modest. It can be challenging to find the appropriate content with a limited team or resources. So I want to start and ask the group here, what is the biggest challenge of those 4 things that you're seeing today? Is it the fact that you're having to reach an audience that's spread across multiple locations? Is it the diversity of the content needs that your organization has? Is it dealing with an audience with a diverse background or age gap and educational differences? Or is it dealing with the budget and the team that you've been given for the project? So I'll pause here a second and leave this poll up for you guys to vote before we move forward. So as you can see, there's really a lot that people have to consider when it comes to the training and development of their employees. In 2016, Burson put out a report that showed not only is a growing amount of time and money being spent on training across the board, but specifically millennials are requesting it, and in my opinion, they're really showing up to work expecting it more than ever. It's been listed as the most coveted job benefit is to be trained and developed on the job. So if you stop and think about that and think about what your employees are actually doing, are they being pushed information or are they pulling information? And if they are pulling information, where are they actually pulling that from? That really got me thinking about something that happened to me a few weeks ago. I was out of town and I was renting a car and needed to take it back to the airport, and I had to stop and get gas before I dropped it off. And I looked all around for the gas tank button and I could not find it anywhere. So without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and I searched VW Jedi gas tank button. The first result was a YouTube video, and within 30 seconds, I was filling up the tank with gas. What's amazing to me is that YouTube is the second most visited website in the world, and today more than 400 hours of content is being uploaded to YouTube every single minute. So this graph that I have up on the screen here shows you the growth that they've experienced over the last 2 years, and that again is hours of content that is uploaded per minute, and that is expected to continue to rise. And thinking back to the situation with the car and trying to find the gas tank button, I didn't even consider opening up the glove box, grabbing out the manual, going to the table of contents, then flipping to the right page, reading where the button was. I did what was natural and what so many modern learners are doing, and I went right for that easy answer. I was really harnessing the power and the speed of informal learning. I've heard the term learning by Google University, and it's extremely common both inside and outside of today's workplace. I'm sure you've all been in the middle of something and interrupted by a coworker with a seemingly simple question about maybe organizing photos into folders on their computer, and you think to yourself, why don't you just go ahead and Google that? And that really is such a natural reaction that we have today, and that is why I believe that informal learning is bound to happen within inside your company, and oftentimes it's a really great thing. I like to think of it in comparison to something like Advil, where Advil is a very effective over-the-counter drug to help a lot of common issues like headaches or sore muscles. Just like informal learning can hit a lot of those basic needs that a learner might have. But as we all know, Advil doesn't cure everything, and that there's many cases where careful diagnosis has to be made to prescribe an effective medication. And as a member of your learning development team, I believe that your focus should first be on that prescribed learning. And if you think about the symptoms that can't be addressed by informal learning, that's a really great place to start. And before I go in a little further and talk about kind of curating the prescriptive learning, I do want to check with the audience again on another poll and see how you guys are handling the informal learning at your organization today? I see a wide range of responses to this. Some people are having it actively encourage. Users are encouraged to go out and find resources and material outside of their company's network. Some people are at the point where they're aware it's happening, but it's not something that's really being measured, or people are engaging with their users and finding out how they're using this. There's also organizations that actively discourage it. Many external sites are blocked, and they're encouraged to pull all of their answers from within inside the organization. And then there's some people who are just starting to really discover how often it's being used, and they're somewhat unaware of how it's being used, and there's no real need at this point to measure that. So I'll give the audience a second here to vote on that, and then we'll move forward and talking a little bit more about finding the fit for that prescriptive style of learning. So to me, deciding a framework for how you pick that learning that you want to prescribe and really focus on the symptoms of your organization that cannot be addressed by informal learning, having a basic framework is a really good first step. And I do think it can be summed up quite well by a quote that I love from John Cleese. And he says, "People learn nothing when they're asleep and very little when they're bored." Just stop and think about that for a second. People learn nothing when they're asleep and very little when they're bored. And it's really absolutely true. These are a few points I had up on the screen of some of the areas that we at Open Sesame look for when we're going through our content. We're looking for stuff that's engaging. If the course is being set up, does it take a long time to really get to the meat of it, or are we getting right in and being able to get information quickly? Is the navigation of the course natural? Is it not going to cause support tickets because people don't know either how to register for a course that your organization is offering, or they don't know how to navigate through an online course that's been made available to them? You also want to make sure you focus on the relevancy. It sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised that you open up materials and they're not current or they aren't correct. And if people have a bad first experience of finding misinformation, they're less likely to want to pull that information later. You also want to make sure that the length is suitable for the lesson that you're teaching. So if you're running a course on how to do quick meetings with your team, an hour-and-a-half long presentation is probably not suitable for something that could be covered much quicker. And then lastly, relatable. This relates back to the culture item that we talked about earlier. So for example, if your office is primarily a casual workplace where people are perhaps wearing jeans and T-shirts, having somebody come in to present in a full suit and tie, or the person on the screen presenting to them is dressed differently than they would in their normal day-to-day life, they're less likely to relate to that speaker and find it relatable to them. You also want to consider those learning environments. If you have people who are out in the field with limited access to computers, having materials available for them that are formatted to be taken on a mobile device, or perhaps if they're in a manufacturing plant and they have no access to headphones, having something that's available where they don't need audio to be able to get the full value of that lesson. So many of you probably have vast amounts of content that's available today, whether that's in Saba Cloud or it's on your SharePoint site, or sitting in folders in your desk drawer. And you really have to think about, how do you make sense of it all? To me, it's a lot like planning a trip overseas for the first time. And right now, I think that Ireland sounds like a great place to go. So I might visit my local library, and I'll probably be instantly overwhelmed by all the choices of books and audio tapes I have on Ireland alone. I could go with a safe bet like The Lonely Planet, and then sitting there and thinking, that's really where the librarian steps in and asks me some more detailed questions. She might ask something like, are you more interested in visiting the city or the countryside? How do you feel about access to nightlife or art? And her questions and prompting helps bring me down into a smaller selection of books, including The Wicked Irish's Guide to Ireland, and ultimately will land me a great vacation where I'm able to enjoy some of the historic castles and coastline of Ireland. And since my trip was successful, because the content that was pushed to me felt very relevant and engaging, and it really caused me to want to pull information for my next trip. now I want to talk to you a little bit about how my librarian actually knew how to do this. And this is where the framework of DOTS comes in. And if you want to follow along, I encourage you to write down those 4 words either on a piece of paper or on your screen. Again, that's discover, organize, tag, and share. So if you want to follow along with me, you're more than welcome to write those down. Most librarians and curators of any industry really start with that discovery piece. And discovery might be fueled by the needs of a client or business pressures or just really their curiosity and interest in a subject. So I have a few examples of places that myself and our clients go to discover new content. So they're searching for things on the internet, they're talking to subject matter experts, or they're working with vendors who specialize in a specific area. But if you want to write down a few places that you go to discover content, that would be great. So you can have those written down for later. Then the next piece that we're going to move on to is organization. And I imagine walking into a grocery store and having fully stocked shelves, but no systematic way of arranging the food. So instead of the flour and the sugar and the other baking supplies being all neatly arranged together, imagine if you were walking around and the flour was on one aisle, the sugar was several aisles down, and the baking soda was somewhere completely different. It would be extremely frustrating to get through a shopping list if nothing was organized. And if you think about that in relationship to your content, are your users today able to get what they need, or are they spending more time hunting around for content than actually learning? So if you're following along, if you want to write down a few ways that you organize your content today, or maybe you know a place right off the top of your head that organization could greatly be improved, go ahead and jot those down. The next area that we're going to talk about is tagging. So tagging really takes organization to the next level. And using tags to further refine those learning assets can be time-consuming, but certainly pays off big when it comes to meeting the expectations of today's modern learner. Tagging can be simple, like indicating whether it's appropriate for beginners or for experts only. People are also using advanced tagging based on keyword research, locational indicators. And organizations are either choosing to have visible tags to their employees to help group the courses together, or some people might keep them behind the scenes and use that to drive data and information. And I know Saba's going to share with us a little bit later some kind of use cases of this. And then the last piece, for tagging, if you want to write down a couple of tags that your organization would use, again, if you're following along with me here, a few tags that you could see using, so indicating things like mobile friendly, is it 508 compliant, is it something that's good for a specific group of users or in a certain location. And then the last section that I have is sharing. And sharing is something that ultimately leads to the consumption of the content. And it really becomes a lot more successful as you work through those previous 3 steps that we just talked about. And I had kind of an example of this that I saw in action. And I've been working closely with the CLO of a Fortune 500 company who was extremely blessed with a wonderful learning culture. They were all very excited about learning. There was a lot of focus and budget and time dedicated to it. The entire organization was in full support of having a great learning culture. And recently, that CLO moved to a much smaller company. And I remember wondering sort of what was behind this move. And we sat down and talked about it. And he explained that he was so excited to take on a new challenge where learning had not been a culture. He was really starting from ground zero and building his way up. And he was going to use the DOTS method to help really fuel learning and organization of the content at his company. So what he did is he started by discovering, and that was going around and meeting the different leaders of the departments and finding out where they needed content, where were some of the skill gaps that they had. He moved into organizing and started simply. He matched courses that he found to his company's job roles and competencies. And then he began by tagging. Again, simple tags to get started. He labeled whether the courses were appropriate for beginner, intermediate, or advanced users. And then really the last piece was where we had our conversation. It was focused around sharing. And he recognized that without really letting people know all this work that had been done, the actual utilization of the content that had been put together wouldn't be very effective. So he enlisted the help of his marketing team, and they came up with a very simple but effective email communication that went out and allowed people an announcement. It was a short video and a blurb about the new courses that were being available to them. And I've seen some really brilliant ideas in terms of sharing the content and some of the marketing that's been done around that. Things as simple as surprise desk drops, where you let people know with a little gift on their desk about new courses that are available. Simple things like posters that are hung up in the lunchroom and break room are a great way to do it. We've also seen people who use little table cards that have a sign say, "Don't bother me, I'm learning right now with a course from my online university," to help give a visual cue that learning is something important and something you should pay attention to. So that again is DOS, and if you're following along for sharing, if you want to write a few ways that you would share content with your audience, that will complete sort of our circle. And again, Saba's going to come back and talk about the way that you can use that in connection with the tools that they have as well. So it looks like we've got a question from the audience. So I'm going to pause here and answer. It says, how do you address different languages? Looking after different locations, languages can be the most challenging. And I absolutely agree that having multiple languages can be a hard thing to support. If you're able to find content that has been not only just translated, but localized into the languages that you need, I find that's a really ideal situation. But we also recognize that that is not always available. And I believe that some of the strategies we've seen for people is being able to use those local resources to either help with translation or find the most critical pieces of information, again, and starting there. What is the materials that need to be covered across the globe, and really focusing on that. If we have some more time at the end, we'll definitely make sure we open that up to the rest of the people on the panel as well, because I'm sure we've got some great ideas from Lauren and the folks at Saba as well, and could maybe speak to that a little further. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward, and the last section here that I want to share with you guys is kind of going beyond that librarian. And I know I've had conversations with people about the amount of content that's available, and actually curating and getting content, not necessarily their problem. In fact, they're swimming in it. It's really how to leverage smaller teams to be able to go through and take some of these additional steps to be able to really highlight and curate the most important content. So I wanted to share a few kind of creative, out-of-the-box ideas maybe that you haven't seen for how to really leverage and scale your team. And the first section I want to talk about is experts. So this is a little snapshot from Twitter. And Twitter was one of the first social media platforms to use account verification. So these are visible indicators that are displayed to the public. Twitter had a huge problem with people creating accounts under the names of celebrities, sports stars, and politicians. And people had a really hard time discerning whether the tweet that they read was actually from Jimmy Fallon or if it was somebody who was posing as him on the internet. So Twitter went through and now has a small check mark, as you can see, that little blue check mark that verifies that this account is actually managed by Jimmy Fallon. Now, if you think about that in a corporate setting, imagine you probably know who is the expert in your organization at project management. And what if you were able to enlist them to help curate the courses on project management that have been the most helpful and the most successful to them? Not only do you harness the power of an expert who's probably going to be able to point you at the best content that's out there today in that certain subject right away, but you also help build an internal learning champion, somebody who's going to be excited to have the recognition as a subject matter expert and to have their name attached to a set of content that they've curated. I also want to bring up crowdsourcing. So this example comes from a local Portland startup. It is a company called Sizzle. And Sizzle's goal is to change the way that people comment and interact with online newspapers and articles. I'm sure if any of you have scrolled down to the article online and read the comment section, you'd be shocked at some of the things that people will say on the internet. And what they have done to help basically increase the speed of the moderators is when you want to leave a comment on an online article, before your comment is posted, you're asked to first peer review 2 other comments that have been left by users. And they ask 2 questions. 1, is it civil? And 2, to rate how the quality of the content. So it's 2 simple questions that are answered before yours is posted. Then they aggregate all this data, and that allows them to filter out any comments that have been labeled as uncivil, and it also puts the highest quality comments towards the top. In their early studies, it has reduced moderation time for them by 90%. Again, thinking about this in the learning and development space, I've spoken with a lot of organizations who have people all across the globe and all their different locations who are creating content, and it doesn't always get reviewed or checked by other people. So imagine if you had to go through the same process before you could upload a new piece of content into the learning management system or on your site, that you needed to have that peer reviewed by 2 other people in your organization. People would, 1, probably have a higher quality of work because they know it's going to be reviewed, and you're also more mindful because you're reviewing other people's work. So it really helps you as you're creating things to think about the way it's going to be received by others. And then the next section is empowerment. It's sort of a simple idea, but when you first get out of college, you have it very in the front of your mind to check your sources, to check your resources and where you got them from, because you're used to writing papers where you have to cite those. As you get further and further into the working world, it becomes a little farther back in your mind. At least with most job roles, you're not having to think about that. But it is so important to still look at the validity of where you're getting your information from today. So empowering your users by creating a training for them to learn how to check sources and how to use that informal learning and be able to indicate whether something is a good learning material or not is very helpful. Or even indicating having a flag button so they can flag content that's maybe out of date or no longer relevant to the organization. And really empowering your users, I think, is a huge, huge benefit. And the last piece is really focus on the tools and the automation. And this is where Saba comes in, and we're going to move it over to them a little bit to talk further. But definitely taking advantage of today's technology to help harness your team and really get a lot more value out of the curation process by using tools that are available for you today. So with that, I'm going to see if there's any pause for a few questions, but want to make sure that we leave enough time for the rest of our speakers, and certainly can answer some more at the end, and turn it over to Saba.
Thank you very much, Brittany. So I'd like to comment on some of the slides, Brittany's slides here, particularly about experts and empowerment and using the tools to do that. We do this, out in the world with the comments on the real life articles that we find online, but also being able to do that internally is a huge value as well, to be able to have a tool that lets you surface the experts, find out who knows what. You'd be surprised at, it's easy to spot the expert that's happy to talk, but it's a little harder to find that expert that might be a little shy sitting in the corner. So having a platform that allows those people to share their knowledge really just incrementally increases the number of people you can draw on and the expertise you can draw on for your content. And likewise with empowerment, being able to have a tool set that lets people leave comments, leave their thoughts on the content you're providing. It just lets you improve at your job and make sure that you're providing the best quality content to your users. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how, I'm going to go back to the concept of the dots and talk a little bit about how technology can help you connect the dots. From organizing your content and connecting it with what people are looking for, such as competencies. I want to get better at X, so I want to find out what training will help me do that, what content will help me do that. To tagging, how do I get access to the information that I need, find the courses that are going to suit me on the particular topic that I'm interested in. Sharing the content. I found a course that I think is going to really benefit maybe my staff member or my colleague one cube over. And who else in my organization has information and content that we can leverage and really build out a full catalog that supports what we need to do as an organization. So let's look at each one of these individually. So on the first topic of discover, how do I find good content? Where is that content out there? So how can you leverage the tools that you might have available to you? The first one, look for content providers that are out there, such as Open Sesame. What content do they have, and how can you leverage it in your organization and bring it in and offer it to your people? What content do you have internally? Who are your experts? So when you have a tool, for example, at SABA, we have a collaborative tool with discussions and comments going back and forth, and very quickly you start to see who has the answers, who's really good at their job and is happy to share their information. And those are people sometimes you can tap on the shoulder to either share some tools that they've already developed or provide input into new curriculum that you're developing. And just sometimes observing the discussions, what kind of questions are being asked repeatedly? And that can give you an idea of what kind of training that your people are crying out for. If people really don't understand a process, maybe it's time to offer some training on that. And again, being able to observe what's happening is really interesting. We have a question about the website and the crowdsourcing image. I think that was from Brittany's slides. Brittany, do you know which image website that was?
That's, I believe it's civil.co. If you look up Civil Portland, you'll probably find it there.
Great, thank you. All right, on to the O's, organizing your content. This is really critical. If you are trying to pull people in and get them to look and proactively consume training and information, you do need to make it easy for them to find. So there are a couple of ways you can do that. Primarily, connecting training and content to skill development is a really great way to do that, because then the conversation, you've really created a great ecosystem and full circle where a manager says, this is a skill I'd like to see you develop. It'll help you advance in your career. The employee then takes this information. They can just look up the skill and quickly identify what training is associated with that skill, what training and courses and content will help advance them in their career, either because they've been advised to by their manager or because it's something that they're interested in and something they'd like to get better at. So that's a really great one to create that kind of ecosystem of development at your organization, this sense of we want you to get better. But organization can be as simple as tagging or putting things in folders, just making it easy for people to drill down and find out what they're looking for. We have a question about an organizational culture that gets people talking on an internal social network that fosters sharing. This is a really great, timely question. If you go looking for SABA's first summer school course, we did a whole session on collaboration and sharing and trying to promote that internally. So I do encourage you to look for that. But it is very much a cultural shift and one that needs to be fostered right from the top, and to encourage it and reward it. And that goes back to surfacing the experts. When you start to reward people for what they share, you start to see a whole lot more sharing. So tagging is another part of this. Again, reviewing and really identifying something as being valuable and worthwhile and relevant. So a couple ways you can do that. You have Web 2.0 associated with your learning, with your LMS. That means allowing ratings of courses and commenting on courses. This is a fabulous way to let people say, this course did what it said it was going to do. So you're going to get a quality check on your learning content, make sure that it is providing the value that you want it to, and addressing the learning topics that you want it to address. It also lets people have sort of expand on what they've learned, maybe have a chat back and forth, and share additional topics. So if a course covered a certain topic and somebody has additional information that builds on that they think would be valuable, it's a way to share it with other people who have taken the course. And of course, ratings give you a sense of what's valuable and what's not. You don't want to flood your LMS with just content for the sake of it. You want to have content that's worthwhile and worth taking, and that the ratings and the comments let you do that. You can also take advantage of simple keyword searches to tag it, make it easy to find, and also featured categories to highlight courses and training, maybe either new courses that you want to have front and center and make sure people are aware of, or specialized topics that you think should be out in front of people. So we have a question about, we have two questions actually, one about examples of rewarding people for what they share. I think one of my favorite ways of doing this, we had at Saba, we have impression awards. So when somebody does something nice, we have a system where we can make an impression. I know this person did X, and I thought that was great. And then we used to draw names and do awards at the end of the quarter. So it really became almost sort of a jostling and friendly, good-natured. Hey, can you help me out here with an impression? Or it just made it fun and a way to really recognize people. You can also tag people as experts. So in their field, so they might have maybe an individual contributor type role, but they can be tagged as an expert in their particular topic. And those are all sort of pats on the back that help people highlight what they're doing and what they're doing well. And it does create a bit of recognition that transcends physical space, which I think is really valuable. We have a question here also about how do you deal with passive culture with recurring inquiries on previously addressed content training. Passive culture can be a real challenge. I think that's the idea of having the training pushed to you and just consuming it and taking it as it comes. I think some of the ways is to maybe change up what you're doing, make things a little bit more proactive, sending people on hunts, but making it fun. We do what we call scavenger hunts at Saba every time we do a new release. We have a list of things for people to go looking for, and they're hidden on our intranet site. Well, not hidden; they're in plain sight, but they're throughout our intranet site, and people have a list of questions, and they go looking. So it does create that sense of going out and finding what's there, and in the process, they end up discovering a whole host of other information that's out there. But it does take a little bit of retraining to get people a little bit more proactive on how they learn. And then we have another question on creating an organizational culture that gets people talking on an internal social network and trying using an internet forum department-wide. So I do have quite a bit of suggestions. I do suggest checking out our Course 1 webinar where we address this in full. It's with another social strategy expert. Bit more than we can go into today, but I do encourage you to find that. We can send it to you as well after the session. All right. The final quarter of this is about sharing, so we've been talking about this a little bit already. But the best way to do that is to share either one-to-one, managers suggesting training for their employees, or getting people to talk and recommend training to one another, really popularize or highlight training that's popular amongst other people. We have a popular learning events that will automatically surface training that people are regularly taking, or again, featured category that highlights what is happening. You can boost this kind of sharing as well, just with some discussions. You can start it as a leader. You can start a discussion and say, who took this? What did you think? What were your thoughts? People do like to give a little bit of feedback if they're prodded to it, but you do need to take a little bit of a leadership role, and that will get people talking about what's happening. And again, the more you get people talking, the more value and feedback you get that lets you develop and reinvest in your training. So I'll pause here. If you have any questions, please submit them. And now we're going to invite Lauren to speak on her experiences directly as the manager and administrator of learning content for Delaware North. Lauren?
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and thank you for having me here today. So hello, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Lauren Clarke, as I was introduced in the beginning, and I am the Lead Development Specialist for Delaware North. Just a quick high-level overview of Delaware North. We are one of the largest and most admired privately held companies in the world. We have 60,000 plus employees all throughout the world, and we're headquartered here in Buffalo, New York. We've been in business for a little over 100 years, founded in Buffalo, and we continue to stay headquartered here in Buffalo. We are $3 billion plus annual revenue, and we are a global leader in hospitality and food service. We service sports stadiums, entertainment complexes, national parks, restaurants, airports, and top regional casinos throughout the country and world. This topic of content, this topic of content curation is extremely timely for our team here at Delaware North. We have been well underway throughout our different processes and evolution, if you will, of virtual learning here at Delaware North. Delaware North has utilized a learning management system through several different providers since 2009. Historically, the learning management system was mainly utilized as a platform for our associates to complete their new hire and required compliance training. Our LMS was not an exciting, interactive platform. It was not integrated in support of many of our talent and workforce development objectives. Our former learning management system provider also was a content provider, and it included a very bulky course library on different professional development training topics. Although relevant, many of these courses were very lengthy, over an hour in duration for an associate to complete. And our associate utilization of these courses were consistently very low, and ultimately so was the return on our investment. In 2014, we focused our efforts to strategically change and improve the virtual learning culture here at Delaware North by evaluating our virtual learning needs and looking at different learning management system and content providers. We felt by separating the learning management system from the content provider, we could leverage our position, providing a vastly improved experience while driving significant savings for our organization. We evaluated our content strategy in order to maximize our investment, recognizing that compliance is only a small piece of the capability that we are looking for from an LMS and from our content. And we really needed to use our learning management system in virtual training to leverage development in all parts of our organization. So in order to find out and to truly understand the needs of our associates and the organization, our team began an extensive research process. We needed to determine, first of all, do we need a learning management system here at Delaware North? But then furthermore, did we need virtual learning content? And what did that look like at Delaware North? We conducted an online survey to determine the level of associate knowledge, satisfaction, and perception of online learning with our previous learning management system provider. At the end of the survey, we had received over 700 unique responses from a wide cross-section of our organization. The respondents represented a diverse demographic of the Delaware North population, from millennials, administrative associates, salaried managers, to seasoned senior executives. And in addition to the survey, we conducted interviews with over 20 stakeholders globally across all of our business units. Again, when you're looking at your associate populations, it's important not to just pinpoint one part of that population. You want to ensure that you are receiving feedback from, a good cross-section of your associates. Several key stats emerged from our associate survey, and we quickly identified that, one size does not fit all. 57 of the respondents said that they prefer online courses versus other forms of learning, and this was heavily favored by our millennials. We also found that ease of system navigation, mobile device capability, and learning relevant to career development were most important to our associates. To sum it up, our users wanted a fast and easy to navigate system with intuitive search capabilities and relevant, quick content that can have a real impact on their current jobs. After evaluating multiple providers, we made the decision in 2015 to begin contract with Saba as our LMS provider and Open Sesame as our content provider. Overall, we've been really impressed with the range and diversity of course titles and providers housed within Open Sesame, from technical skills, compliance topics, professional and personal development topics. And also we found the relevancy of course titles in relation to our company competency model. Many of the courses are quick, or we consider them bite-sized learning chunks, so our users can learn within their busy schedules. That was one key piece of feedback that we received throughout our survey, is that learners simply didn't have time to complete the training during their workday. And they wanted more, quick learning bites that they could learn and then quickly apply on the job application. Over half of our Open Sesame library is mobile friendly, which is a huge advantage, especially for our associates working in our entertainment complexes and stadiums, ballparks. Many of our frontline leaders and managers are on the go and easily have access to mobile devices such as smartphones and tablets. And we really appreciate that the Saba platform is mobile friendly, and so is over half of our Open Sesame Plus library. A huge advantage as well working with Open Sesame is that we could pick and choose the courses that we wanted to import into our learning management system that are important to our business, instead of importing one big bulky course package with irrelevant course topics. So our journey definitely continues as far as our, content curation here at Delaware North, but also engaging our associates and raising utilization. The biggest thing that we've identified as far as engaging associates is, first, constant top-of-mind communication, ensuring that our users, our associates, know where to go, how to access the learning management system, but also the types of content that's available to them within our library. Also creating a what's in it for them, and content that is relevant to mission-critical roles and competencies. We have continued to actively work on categorizing our Open Sesame library within our learning management system and categorizing it by competencies, but also integrating it in with top-of-the-mind initiatives such as our performance management system and succession planning. We also take advantage of using the featured categories to highlight new trainings that we have imported into the system and how they can be leveraged for different business initiatives throughout the organization. Also looking at, again, around the courses, the bite-sized learning chunks. So when we have managers or frontline leaders, reaching, seeking some quick development options, we are reassured that we have a large library of quick courses that we can refer to them. And many of these courses come with principal job aids and, tangible resources that they walk away from. And as I mentioned, of course, we make the content job-specific, mobile-friendly, and just-in-time. Our journey to raise utilization of our learning management system in virtual courses definitely continues. And as it's been mentioned in the earlier slides, it is absolutely crucial to have an all-level awareness when it comes to creating a learning culture within your organization, working in harmony with marketing, continuous improvement cycle, and a fully engaged associate. We do believe as we continue to evolve and grow with our learning culture here at Delaware North that this will continue to raise utilization, and we are able to then further bridge our library resources to future initiatives within the company. We also want to continue to improve our virtual learning as a commitment to all of our associates that learning and development is important at all levels of the organization, from our hourly level associate all the way up to our executive leadership. It's absolutely crucial that there is that awareness and understanding, and that your learning management system, along with your content and your virtual library, are very much integrated in with the company's overall mission and vision for the organization.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And it looks like we are having a little bit of audio issues. There was a couple of comments that came in regarding audio, so I do apologize if anyone did have difficulty hearing.
Thank you. Yeah, there's been a little bit of cutting out. Hopefully people have got the bulk of our message. One thing I did want to touch on, just as we look like we do have time, I wasn't sure, so I skipped over it, is we've talked about content and we've talked about the LMS, and I just want to point out that bringing the two together does not have to be a big challenge. Setting up Open Sesame has a connector with Saba. It's just simple drag and drop and bring in the content. What's really nice about this is that you can take the Open Sesame content as it is and build the course as they've defined it, or you can take the content and add it to your own content to really contextualize it with some things that are very maybe specific to your organization before offering it out to the field. So it doesn't have to be a big onerous task to identify the content that you want and make it available in your LMS to your users. It can be just as simple as some drag and drop. So with that, I do invite people to submit their questions. We'd love to hear what you have to say and be able to provide more information. And I'm going to so we do have a question about the previous LMS that Delaware North used. I don't know that we can address that online, but I do think it's important for people who are if you're not content with your current LMS and how it's able to manage your content, to think about the things that Lauren described, what your priorities are, what's important to your users, and then take a look at whether your LMS is able to do that for you, or whether you need something else that suits your needs better. Do we have any other questions from our audience today? No, looks like it's pretty quiet out there. I hope you found this session valuable. I'd really like to thank our presenters, Lauren and Brittany. Your insight was really valuable. It was great to hear what you had to say, and I know our audience got a lot of value out of that as well. We are offering another session in the Saba Summer School, so please watch your inbox for the invite. And I did mention the session 1 that we did. The recordings are available both on our Saba.com website as well as our Bright Talk channel. I also want to revisit the topic about multi-language content, which is a huge challenge for our international customers. And we have a really great case study on Hyatt Hotels on Saba.com and how they've addressed this issue of a multinational, multilingual workplace. They had some really great ideas about how to make content, multilingual and available to their workforce. So please go to saba.com and look for the Hyatt use case. It's very interesting and I think really valuable. All right. We have a question. We do have a question for Open Sesame here about any restrictions for using content 24/7.
Sure, that's a great question. So the Open Sesame courses specifically are self-paced e-learning content, so there is no live element to them. So you really can't have your users accessing that learning 24 hours a day. One of the things we also have is a requirement that any courses have bookmarks. So if you can't complete a course, then it will bookmark and save your progress as well. So it's really helpful if you've got an audience who is having to step in and out of time that's available for them to do training.
Great. And we have and also questions about content available on mobile devices for Open Sesame.
Sure, I can speak to a little bit about that from the Open Sesame side. That's something that's a key piece we see a lot. People will check and they assume that if the LMS has mobile capabilities, that automatically means content that either they're building for it or using from a place like Open Sesame is available on mobile. And we found that that's something that's easily missed, and it's very important to pay attention to. So Open Sesame today, over a quarter of our entire catalog, which again is 20,000 courses, is available for mobile. And we've seen that dramatically rise in the last year. And we expect it to continue to rise by the end of this year. We are expecting that number to grow 10 or 20% in terms of the courses that are available via mobile.
Great, thank you. We have a question. I think there are two questions tied to how do you deal with training when most employees are in operations, and I think the follow-up is and don't have easy computer access. I can speak for quite a few of our customers who are in that same space. We have a lot of manufacturing customers. There are usually a couple ways they do it. Either they take people off the floor and conduct live training, which is hard to scale, but is doable. The most common thing that we're starting to see now, though, is making available sort of the public tablet and letting people do some training again on mobile device, just to the side, a little bit off the factory floor, and then come back on. So that lets it get passed around, and it doesn't disrupt the workflow too much, and gives them access to some of that great online content. I don't know if anybody else on the phone has some thoughts on that as well. No. We have another question about what's the process if your content vendor doesn't have a connector with Saba. There are a couple of ways to handle that. We can address that for you if you're a Saba customer in our customer community, but some vendors will make the actual content package available to you, and then you can import it into your Saba content repository and attach it to a course there. Other vendors won't do that, but what they will do is give you a link to the content, and the link can be attached to your Saba course as a learning object, and it will direct users to that content when they're ready to take it. The connector it certainly streamlines a lot of that, but it's still quite possible to access the content. There's a question at the top on thoughts of the Saba workspaces, and do many companies use them? I am personally a big fan of the Saba workspace. One of my responsibilities in the past has been to train the global consulting workforce, and I use workspaces to do that enormously because it lets me organize content, organize thoughts, and really sort of create a path and a quick reference point for people to work through and find the resources that they want. I found it gave me a really easy way to centralize everything that I wanted to point people to, whether it was a formal document or a discussion or a workbook that somebody had shared. So I find them personally very, very useful. Again, if you're a Saba customer, you'll see on our customer community that we use a workspace for our Community Central. So if you look at the top across the tab, you'll see the Community Central tab. That is built using workspaces, and you can get a sense of how it can be used to really organize and highlight the resources that are available. We have another question about marketing to off-site employees. Maybe, Lauren, that's a good question for you. It sounds like a lot of your employees are operating outside of an office.
Yes, great question. So we rely very heavily on any virtual communication, if you will, that we can get our hands on, from email blasts to our internal, we refer to it as our 360 newsletter that goes out on a weekly basis, along with some other internal newsletters that are distributed to our associate population. And we also have a intranet portal in which we will update and share relevant information pertaining to our learning management system, along with different content training topics. Since our associate population is so spread out and so diverse, we rely very heavily on these, virtual channels of communication.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. The last question here is from somebody who has been developing their own content and how to migrate that content into the SABA LMS. SABA has an import tool that will let you do a bulk import of your content from a central drive and bulk import it into SABA, where you can then attach it to courses and curriculum and make it available. So again, it's not quite as automated as the connector, but it's still very easy to use. So do check the integration studio in SABA for that import spreadsheet and the documentation, and you can find out how to use it. If you do need any support, SABA services will be happy to help you. All right, we are at the top of the hour, so I thank you again for joining us. I hope it was very valuable to you and that you got a lot out of this. And please keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation to our next session. Thank you.